Hey y'all, it's Ryan. In today's video, we are going to create a 6-word memoir activity that you can use with your students at any time of the year. So let's get to it. Now, before we get into it, I want to share with you a step-by-step guide on how you can create this activity. If you click on the link in the description box below, it will automatically download the PDF to your device. Once we get into building, if you decide this is way too much for me right now, that's cool too. I have an editable template of the 6-word memoir activity that we're going to create ready for you. It is already formatted to be a quick print and go activity if needed. If you're using it online, it has all of the links already there for student templates that they can use, as well as examples and space for students to brainstorm and work. So if at any point during the building process you decide you'd rather buy the template, I'll link that in the description box as well. So with all that said, let's get into it. So the first thing that we need to do in order to create our 6-word memoir activity for our students is to create a new blank slides presentation. So to do this, you have a few options. One, go into your Google Drive, click New, and click Google Slides, blank presentation. Or in a new tab, you can type in slides.new and it will automatically bring you into that blank presentation for you. The second thing that we're going to do is I'm going to close out this themes tab over here, and then I'm going to title my presentation. So I'm going to change this to say 6-word memoir. And then I'm also going to get rid of the title box and text box that are on that slide. Third, I need to, because I want to format this so that I can use it as either a print and go activity or a digital activity to share with my students, I need to change or adjust the setup of this page. So I'm going to go to File, Page Setup, change widescreen to custom. And then because our pages that we're printing on our paper is typically 8.5 by 11, I'm going to click Apply after I make those adjustments. Now I have my page set up so that I can print this easily or I can share it with my students. Now that I have my page set up, I'm going to start building the actual layout on these pages. So for me, the first thing I like to do is come up here to this shape icon, and I like to put in a large rectangle in the center of my page. So I got my red lines, my crosshairs, so I know it's centered on that page. The reason I do this, one, I think it looks nicer, but two, I know for sure that any text or images or any elements that I put within this rectangle, they're going to be printed properly on my page. So it gives me kind of a border to play in. I also like to change or adjust the fill color to this second one, so light gray 3, and then adjust my border color to pure black, and then the weight up to 3. Again, I think it just looks really nice, and it's, again, easy for me to make sure that everything I'm putting in this area, in this container, is going to show up on my printed page. Next, I like to, again, go to my shapes. I'm going to add a second rectangle in the middle. And actually adding this rectangle is going to make me adjust to my larger rectangle because I like this to sit in the middle so it just looks nicer. First, I'm going to adjust the color to match my first rectangle that I built. And then I'm going to adjust this larger one. So again, this smaller one fits in the center of it. The reason I add this, it's kind of a title container for me, because if I'm going to print this at the top of my page when I'm looking for it, I can easily see my 6-word memoir title. So it's just a quick and easy way for me to know that's what I'm looking for. So I am going to change my font to Georgia. I just think that looks very clean. You can change it to whatever font that you want. I'm going to bump it up to 18 and then bold as well. And then the last thing I want to make sure before I start typing is that it is aligned center, and then it's going to end up in the middle of that box. So again, typing 6-word memoir here. And now I have the setup the background layout that I'm going to use on all of my pages from here on out. The next thing that I'm going to do is click on my text box icon, and I'm going to add two separate text boxes. I'm going to click on my screen and then drag this to the middle. And here, again, changing it to Georgia, but I'm going to lower that font down a bit. This is where my students will write their name. And then I'm going to click on that text box, and on my keypad, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate, so I know it's the exact same size as my first one, although I do need to adjust. And then I'm going to change that to say date. Now I'm going to use my crosshairs to drag this text box so that they are aligned center. So you see that red line, that means that they're in the same spot. They're aligned on my page. So now I have my name and my date spot for my students, again, if I'm wanting to print this out to use as a print and go activity. The next thing I'm going to do is add a rectangle on my page to kind of act as a page break. It's also a really good container to use to let students know, like, this is the next piece of information is important. These are your directions. So again, shape icon, rectangle. This one I did take outside of that box because it has an overhang. I'm okay with that. And then I'm going to change the fill to solid black, make sure my border color is the same, and then make sure my font again will be center aligned and in the middle of this box. Update my font, and then I like this to be a lot larger, and then I also need to change my text color. Let's change it to white and make it bold. So in this box, I'm going to type in 6-word memoir directions. So I can make this even a little bit bigger. There we go. Now it's very clear to my students what they're about to read. Next up, I'm going to insert a text box. This is where I'm actually going to put my instructions for my students. I do like having the text box kind of hang out of the directions so they're connected, but I want to make it very clear that it's its own element, it's its own piece. So my fill color is transparent. My border color, I'm going to make it black to match everything else and then bump it up to 3. Now you'll notice that there's a line going through my words 6-word memoir directions. In order to change that, I'm going to click on that shape, that rectangle, right click on my mouse and click order and select bring to front. Now my text box is behind that page break and I can start typing in it. I will have to consider that I'm going to have to enter to get my text out from beneath that page break. So to save time, I am going to copy and paste the text that I have already created for the text boxes for students. So I like to add the word challenge because then I am then tasking my students with a challenge. It's going to be difficult. They're going to have to think, but it also adds a little bit of that competition of, I know you can do this, but it's going to be difficult. Now that I have my page break and kind of my introduction and directions to my students, just giving them kind of an idea of what we're doing, I'm going to give them more directions. So just like I did with my previous text box, I'm going to click on my text box icon and create a new one, drag it to the center. I'm going to change the border color to black and the border weight to 3. So again, it just matches the theme, the look that I have going on. So in this box, this is where I have a little bit more instructions for my students, as well as some guiding questions to help them think about, what to consider when reading these 6-word memoirs that we are evaluating and that we're analyzing. And then to the right of that box, I'm going to add a second text box just to kind of keep my students aware that a memoir is something written to be shared publicly. So maybe not share something that is too painfully personal because we are going to be sharing this with our classmates. So again, I just created a text box, changed my border color and weight to 3 to match, and then here are the rest of my instructions. Underneath these instructions, I'm going to now insert a table. I'm going to click on Insert and Table, and then I'm going to create a table that is 2 by 11. So I want to give my students 10 examples of 6-word memoirs to read and analyze, but I also need to title those 2 columns. So my left column is going to be titled 6-word memoir examples, and my right column is going to say my analysis. Now this font doesn't match, so I'm going to highlight those 2 cells, change my font to Georgia. I'm going to bump it up a bit, make it bold, and then center it in the middle of these, the cells. Next, I'm going to add 10 examples of 6-word memoirs that I found. If you want to change these, you're totally more than welcome to. I found these at 6wordmemoirs.com. So right here, I'm going to zoom in a bit, click on my little magnifying glass and zoom down here at the bottom. You'll see that my table is outside of my border. So I'm going to adjust the text that I have up at the top to make sure that my table fits into my space. All right, there we go. Here is the first page for my 6-word memoir activity for my students. There are 4 pages total in this activity, so let's move on to creating the second page that our students are going to use. There are a couple of options for you when creating a new page. You can click on the plus sign to add a blank new slide down here to the bottom. Or if you see that your slide is highlighted in blue, on your keyboard, hit Control D to duplicate. Now I have the slide duplicated and I can come in here and delete elements that I no longer need for this page. Either way, it's up to you. My personal preference, I like creating a blank slide, deleting the text boxes that are on there. So then you're going to click on or select the pieces that you want to copy and then bring over to the new page. For me, it's the 6-word memoir title and then the large rectangle that I'm using as my background. So I've clicked on them. I'm going to click Control C for copy, or you can right click on your mouse and click copy. Come over to my blank slide and paste it onto my slide. So now everything is exactly where it needs to be. I don't have to move it around, and I can start building page 2. So just like I did on page 1, I have 3 different sections on here. The first one is for planning. So again, go to Shape, create a rectangle, fill, I made it black with the border black, and I changed my font to Arial and my text to white. So again, bump that text up, and this is for planning. I'm going to make that nice and bold. Same steps as I did in the previous slide. Create a text box, center it on my rectangle, make that border black and the weight 3. Click on my black shape, my black rectangle, click Order, and bring to front. So now my text box is behind that page break. So again, because this is a text box, I'm going to click into the middle of it and hit enter at least once to bring my text down below that shape. And if you need to, you can actually do this a couple of times. I usually do, but then I make the font size of that line that I've hit enter on, I make it really small. So that way I have a little bit of space up at the top, but my text still fits in that text box nicely. So then I'm going to copy this black shape right here. So copy and then paste. I'm going to just drag it down. This I'm going to make a little smaller. So same steps, create a new text box. Make sure it's centered. The border is already black and at 3-point because I've been using that a lot, so it's recognizing what I'm changing it to. Going to click on that rectangle, click order, and bring to front. Hit enter and add my text. So I'm actually going to drag this text box down just a little bit to create a little space between the final line and my box. And then the last piece that I need to create, I'm just going to again copy that rectangle up at the top, except this one, this is actually just text. So I'm going to make the font smaller and take the bold off. So it doesn't take up as much space. So I give my students more space for brainstorming. So in this section is where I give students 3 boxes to start filling in and thinking about the questions that were posed above in the writing ideas section. So I'm actually going to shrink that rectangle to fit within the larger background, unlike what I've done with these two. So that way I know my text doesn't bleed off onto this white space that I've given myself. So then for this, I'm going to just create 3 rectangles. I'm going to try and space them out as evenly as possible in this section, but also use up the most amount of space that I can. So once I have my first rectangle, I'm going to, on my keyboard, hit Control D for duplicate. And I have a lot of space in between these two, so I'm actually going to make them all a little bit bigger. And if you notice, when I'm dragging this over at the very bottom of the rectangles, you'll see a blue line that has 2 tick marks on it. That tells me that those rectangles are now the same size. So that's what I'm looking for when I am adjusting these rectangles to, again, give my students just a little bit of extra space. So now I'm going to select all 3 at once. To do that, I'm going to click on 1, make sure it's highlighted in blue, hold the Control key down on my keyboard, and click on my other 2. That way I can adjust them all at the same time instead of having to do them one by one. So I'm going to change my border color and the weight, again, just to match everything else. I also want these to be centered on the page. So again, selecting all of them at once and then dragging them until I see that red line to tell me that they are indeed centered on my page. So I'm going to go through the same steps of creating a new page. So on this slide, I'm actually creating a drafting space for my students. So I'm going to go back to my previous slide to grab this planning page break. I'm going to copy it and paste it onto this slide and then just change that to say drafting. Because now I know that they match. They're the exact same size. The font is all done for me. We're good to go. So text box, make sure that it is centered. Adjust my border color and weight, and then make sure that that page break is on the top or in front of my text box, and then add my text. So click enter a couple of times and then add my text here. I'm going to make that area of that line smaller and then drag my text box down just a little bit. So on this page, I am giving students space to write the 6-word memoir that they have chosen, because on the previous page I had them brainstorm 3 ideas. So now I want them to choose their favorite or their best one and write it out. So I'm going to actually give them lines to write on if I want to make this a print activity. So I have added a text box, and now I'm just going to add 6-word memoir. I like making it all caps because then it's very clear of what exactly I'm asking them to write in this area or this space. Then I'm going to give my students lines to write on. So I'm going to click my line icon at the top, and then I'm just going to drag that line and make it as straight as I possibly can. And then Control D to duplicate this line, bring it over and down a little bit, and then drag this over to meet up with or align with the other line that I've created. I'm going to hold down my Control key and select both of those lines at the same time because they are a very light gray and they're thin, they're difficult to see. So I'm going to change the line color and weight. And then if I want to, which I do, I want to make sure that these lines are in fact aligned on the side. So I have zoomed in to get a close-up of these lines. They look good to me, so I'm going to go back to fit. The next piece that I need to add is I'm going to give my students a space for them to brainstorm ideas for the images they're going to look for to go along with their 6-word memoir, or the drawings that they start sketching out the drawings that they want to use to connect with the words that they're putting for their memoir. For that, I'm going to click on the shape again, select rectangle, and give my students a nice large area, large space to start sketching or coming up with those ideas. Again, I need to adjust my border color and the weight to make sure it matches. But then I also, because this is a text box, I want to let them know what they're putting in this space. So instead of being centered and centered in the middle, I'm going to say top and left aligned. I'm going to change my font and say images that connect with my memoir. So this is a nice space for my students to brainstorm the images that they're going to use to make the connection between picture and text. Now, before I move on to my summary section, I need to adjust the fill in this box so that it matches with the rest of my page. So click on my fill button at the top and then select that light gray 3, and now it matches. So for my summary section on this page, I'm going to do the same steps that I did for my 6-word memoir section where I wanted my students to write it out. So I'm going to select that text box, duplicate it, and then drag it down to the space that I'm going to use for my lines. To duplicate them, so I'm going to do the same thing for my lines. I'm going to click on one line, hold down the Control key on my keyboard, select the second one, and do Control D for duplicate. And then I'm going to be very careful to make sure that I am actually grabbing these lines and not the background. There we go. Okay. I need to make this say summary. And then a summary for us is about 4 to 5 sentences. I need more than 2 lines, well, 1 3/4 line for my students to write their summary on. So now that I have these 2 started, I am going to duplicate that second one and drag it so that it's centered. And then a little cheat, I'm going to now grab the 2 longest lines, duplicate them, grab them, and pull them down. Now, here I know that my lines are centered, but I also know that they're evenly spaced because on the side there was that blue line with the tick marks on it that says that they are an even amount. They're evenly apart. So now my students have the lines that they are going to use to write their summary, and I'm going to start working on the final page of this activity. So same steps, click on the plus for a blank slide, delete the text box that's in there, grab my title and my layout, and copy and paste them onto this slide. So again, I'm going to come back to slide 3 and grab this drafting box. I'm going to copy and paste it onto this page, but now I'm going to title it Publishing. So on this page, this is where my students Now we've brainstormed, they have a good idea. Now we need to finalize and publish our 6-word memoirs to share with each other. So I'm going to give them the instructions of what they can use for sharing and publishing their 6-word memoirs with everybody. I'm going to grab a text box. I'm going to change the border color and weight, and then make sure I pull this publishing box to the front. Going to click enter a couple of times to get my text out from underneath that box. And then I can actually adjust it to make it a little smaller. So now I've gone through, we've analyzed others, we've drafted our own, it's time to share them with our peers. So I have actually given students 3 options in this activity. They can decide to use a Google Slides presentation like what we're creating now to put an image with the text of their 6-word memoir plus a summary on the second slide, or they can use Canva to do that as well. The third option that I've added a button for is for Flip. So the thinking with Flip is that they can go in and create a video with the background of their image and have the text on the screen. So for students who are a little bit more artistically inclined or who really want to hand draw an image that connects with their 6-word memoir, I can see them hand drawing that image, taking a picture of it, and setting it as the background in their video in Flip. So here's how we make the buttons on our page so that if we're sharing this digitally with our students as a digital activity, they can click on the button, it'll take them to that template, and they can create from there. So the buttons that I'm using are just rectangles. I'm going to create 3 smaller rectangles. I'm going to set the fill for black, and then I'm going to again change my font, bump it up, make it bold and white, and then make sure that it's center aligned. So their first option is a Google Slides presentation. I'm going to duplicate that button, drag it down here. I'm going to change that to say Canva. That's their third option. Going to duplicate that one more time. And this is going to say Flip. So I've already created student templates for students to use when creating their own 6-word memoir. The way that I have the link set up is so when students click on the button, it will force them to make their own copy to use. How I add links into this document is I'm going to select the button that I want to link, click on my insert link button icon up at the top, and then paste the link into this slides document. So now you can see here is their 6-word memoir template that I've created. And then if they open this up in a new tab, it's going to force them to make their own copy. I've also done this for Canva. However, there is a difference between Google Slides and Canva when forcing students to make their own copy. In Google Slides, I have to edit the URL at the end to take out the word edit and insert the word copy before I add the link. In Canva, whenever I go up to the share button in the upper right-hand corner, I have an option that says template link. So when I make this a public or a live template, it gives me a code or a link just like Google Slides does, so that whenever students click on the link, it will take them to their own copy. It will say customize this template. So now as a student, I click edit template. It's making me my own copy of this so that I don't have all students jumping and working on the same document at once. The last option that I would give students for this is Flipgrid. So again, if I have a student who wants to draw out their image connection, or who would much rather say their summary instead of writing it down or typing it up, this would be a great option for them. So for Flip, I would go in, create my own group, assign the topic, and then share the topic link, add that into the button here in Google Slides. So after all of that, we have our 6-word memoir activity ready to print and go. If you've made it this far with me, fantastic work. Super proud of you because that was a lot of repeated steps of making shapes and text boxes and adding text and doing all of that. However, here's the beauty of it. You now have a great activity that you can use at the beginning of the year, at the start of a new semester, as a sub-plan activity, because let's be real, we need those. And then lastly, it's a really different way to analyze a character. So if we've been reading a novel and I want my students to analyze a character, I would have them step into that character's shoes and create a 6-word memoir about their experience in that novel. They can still create an image that connects to it, and their 6-word memoir really shows me if they're following the character arc and the motives and all of the conflict and resolution that's happening in the story that we're reading. I hope that you enjoyed learning how to make this 6-word memoir activity that you can use at any time of the year. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so that you're notified whenever new videos are posted. Hope to see you soon.